The Cuyahoga County Human Resources Appointments and Equity Committee is now called to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Ms. Turner.
Present.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Ms. Conwell. Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Adrian Early.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Adrienne Early. I am a 20 years employee with Job and Family Services and the ASME Union Steward for the Virgil E. Brown Building. Just want to give you a few facts with JFS. The first fact I want to go over is that according to the last census in 2021, Cuyahoga County has approximately 218,989 SNAP recipients, and JFS has approximately 416 eligibility specialists to service all those recipients. The other fact I want to bring to your attention is that the main complaint from a lot of our customers in the call center model is the average wait times of 1 to 4 hours. The JFS administration has notified the staff last week of the rotation back into the building. However, again, we still need to address these phone issues and the wait times. The other fact is the call center hours are from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. The rest of the day, staff is split between handling whatever calls are in the queue and processing work. Again, looking at that 416 staff to over 200,000 recipients in the county. And lastly, I'd like to state that we can all agree that long wait times is a true disservice to our community. Thank you.
Catherine Randall.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Randall, and I'm the Union Steward for AFSCME 27. When I was here the last time, we were discussing the subject of work from home, and I just wanted to give you an idea of how possibly bringing staff back in 2 days versus 3 days is an impact on their purse strings. A young lady that works in my unit, her daughter started kindergarten, and if she she would have to pay $120 per week for 3 to 5 days. Now that she's able to work from home those 3 days, her child care is now $42 per week. Not only that, her productivity is increased when she's working from home 3 days a week, and she has a better work-life balance. So I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention. Thank you.
Michelle Dowd.
Good morning. I am Michelle Dowd. I am an employee of Cuyahoga County Health and Human Services. I currently work from home, and I really enjoy the work-life balance. It allows me to spend time with my daughter, spend time with my husband. My productivity is at its max, 100%. The inability to have to possibly come into the office more days than I am at home would just it would be a strain on the family in general. My daughter is getting ready to go to high school. I need to be there for her in all aspects, all areas, and I just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention today. Thank you for your time.
Alwyn Reed.
I don't want to step away from the mic. I don't want to get started right away. But can I hand these out to you guys, or how does that go?
I can take those.
Okay. My name is Alan Reed. I'm Vice President, Local 27, OCSS. What's in those letters that I'm giving you guys are 2 letters from workers who are explaining how the work from home situation works best for them. So while if you guys get a chance to read over, another letter consists of our basically our current hybrid plan that gives you a job, kind of like a brief synopsis of what we do on our day-to-day job for each department. So while you guys, if you get a chance to read over that, but real quick, I just want to let you guys know how this hybrid situation would benefit the county, okay? One, it will be for uninterrupted service. If you're working from home, whatever the system goes down or whatever electrical problems we have in the building, the work from home people are able to cover that because they're working from home. Long as the state system is up and running, the county system is up and running, we have access, we can work. Now, if we're in the building, and there's no work getting done, when electricity goes out, power goes out, whatever happens in the building. Okay, you're working from home, you're able to do that. More people at home, the better off to get the job done. Second, increase department productivity. I'm more productive at home, not gonna lie. Yesterday I was at home, more from my work from home days. I was able to get more things done than I am normally able to get done on my days in office. My days are in office are on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so it's a little bit much more of a struggle for me to get stuff done on those days in office. Lastly, another thing, it will also help out with less time needed for people to take off different times for different things. Most doctor's offices are within about 15, 30 minutes away from your home. That's less time used, less time commuting. It also helps out with the county, and also absenteeism. It breaks down with the illness. If you're at home, you are less likely to call off. If you're working from home, you can work from home, work through your illness, whatever you're going through, and then be able to come back to work and be productive. So that's less time missing from being productive from your job. And lastly, that's it.
Madam Chair, that concludes our public comment. Madam Chair, if you'd like to approve the minutes.
I have a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll second it.
I'm
That
sorry,
would be
can you
from the-
clarify who motioned?
Dale Sweeney.
Thank you.
Then those minutes were from the September 17th meeting. Okay. Before we begin our discussions regarding ordinance 2024-0008, enacting Cuyahoga County's remote work policy, I want to express my sincere thanks to the employees who voiced their concern about this legislation. Your perspective was helpful. It informed our discussions with the administration as we work towards an equitable solution on behalf of the county and its employees. While the administration has been adamant the legislation must limit remote work to no more than 2 days, the policy allows for more days if there is approval from the chief of staff based on a business need. I want to emphasize, even if council added days to the legislation, a department's remote work policy could limit days to less than 3 or none at all. As it relates to the employees who have appeared before this council on behalf of their specific departments, County Chief of Staff Eric Janis has assured us that you will receive timely communications regarding your department's remote work policy once finalized. And if changes are made to your current work situations, ample time will be provided to allow for adjustments. It is my understanding the administration will expand on this during today's committee presentation. I would like to thank the administration for their work developing this policy, which is designed to support remote work environments and improve work-life balance for our employees. With this objective in mind, the policy also ensures operational efficiencies, flexibility, and equitable expectations, with the primary focus being on those the county serves. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the item?
It's 2024-0008, enacting Section 302.04 of the Cuyahoga County Code, modifying Section 12.09 of the Cuyahoga County Employee Handbook, and providing a new Section 12.10. And Madam Chair, there is a proposed substitute for consideration.
Thank you. Good morning.
Madam Chair,
Councilman?
now that we're out of public comment and the legislation is before us, may I ask a question of the last person who spoke on public comment?
Sure.
Mr. Reed?
Come on up.
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Reed, you said that you're able to get more work done at home than at the office, and it would seem to me that when you're at home there would be distractions from home related stuff, and at the office it would be easier to focus. So my question is, what is it about being at the office that makes it harder and enables you to be more productive when you're at home?
Well, I'm gonna answer the latter part first, which is the home. When I'm at home, it's really just me. So, my kids are going off to school. I'm able to be at home when they get off to let them in the house. But it's really just me and my computer working versus me coming in the office, having to, like, say, if I walk out the hallway, I'm vice president. So I walk out the hallway, so-and-so wants to stop and speak to me. Or I have an impromptu disciplinary hearing that day. When I already get up in the morning, I kind of triage my day, see how it's going to go. But when I get there, that plan changes because of somebody may have a meeting that popped up that day that I need to attend. Or you want to talk to me in the hallway about, let's just say, the contract or whatever you and your supervisor is going through. Those are the things that prohibit me from really being more productive at work, because those things happen on a random, and I can't, being the vice president, I can't tell a person like, no, I can't talk to you. That's one of my jobs as being their vice president, to listen to them and work through whatever, help them work through whatever situations they're going through, whether it's with their supervisor or management team. So those days, we do a log every day at our job, right? And we have to put everything that we do in our log. So when you look at my log, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my least productive days. When you look at Monday, Thursday, Friday, I am productive because I'm at home by myself. I'm able to do my work. If I have any questions, we have teams. I could get a team message out to either my supervisor or a member of my team. Or I could pick up the phone and call, or I could send an email. So there's a lot of ways I'm more productive at home versus in the office.
Okay, thank you very much. That was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Councilman Miller. Okay.
Good morning, Chairwoman Turner, members of the committee. I'm Sarah Nemistal, Director of Human Resources for the County Executive. Before we get started, did you want me to point out the changes in the proposed substitute first?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay. So the proposed substitute we submitted has some substantive changes and some cleanup. Big changes are in Section 3 to the eligibility section. We made some changes based on a request from the Personnel Review Commission. I presented on the legislation to the commissioners at their August meeting, and they had a request that we more clearly articulate in the policy that if someone meets the position eligibility criteria and the criteria for employee eligibility, that the legislation say they are eligible for a remote work agreement. So we incorporated that language, and then some minor tweaks to Section 3.1, which speaks to position eligibility. In Section 8, for the worksite requirements, we removed some language in the workers' compensation section, namely to just point out what the accident reporting procedures are in the handbook, and that employees should continue to follow those, and that there is a right to inspect. And then in the appendix to the policy, which is the IT, technology, and security requirements, IT made some cleanup there as well.
Any questions? Okay, seeing no questions. I'll make the motion to accept the proposed substitute. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of accepting the proposed substitute? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is passed.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of Director Nimistal? Through the chair to the director, the highlighted items that are in red, they were in there during our discussion or the meeting when we met,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Okay, so I did prepare a brief presentation to walk you through the nuts and bolts of the policy. I just want to start by saying that we are very excited to present this legislation for a proposed remote work policy for Cuyahoga County employees who are subject to the employee handbook. So those are our employees who work for the county executive agencies or county council. We believe this policy will allow greater flexibility to our employees who are able to effectively perform their jobs in a remote environment, and also help us attract a wider candidate pool for our positions, increase our employee job satisfaction, engagement, and retention. So I want to start off by saying that the remote work policy is a framework for departments and agencies under the executive to adopt and implement their own remote work policies. It basically sets forth terms and conditions that we expect to be part of all departmental policies. The legislation does require all departments to establish and implement their own policy in accordance with the framework. And before those policies would be approved and implemented, the Chief of Staff and Human Resources has to approve them. With regard to the definition of remote work, it is work performed in a designated alternative work location outside of a county facility. It is separate from the telecommuting section, section 6.09 of the employee handbook, which basically allows employees to seek a temporary telecommuting arrangement for reasons that are specified in the handbook. Inclement mother is one, for example, dependent care. It is a management right or option as opposed to an employee right. And we've generally limited it to no more than 2 workdays per work week. And it would be subject to the terms and conditions of an approved agreement. We do have an exception, which Chairwoman Turner spoke about this morning, is basically Chief of Staff approval. So Section 5.01 does provide a procedure for departments to request an exception from the 2-day requirement to Chief of Staff. Basically, if they can outline extraordinary circumstances justifying remote work for the agency, and also show that productivity could be monitored at any given time while the employees are remote. In terms of eligibility, the policy calls for a 2-part analysis. First part is position eligibility. And then if you have employees who are serving in eligible positions, there's an analysis to determine if the employee is too eligible for remote work. So for position eligibility, this remote work policy in the legislation doesn't have a list of positions that are eligible for remote work. Instead, we have put together a list of 7 criteria for departments to consider to determine if a position is eligible for remote work in consultation with HR. And again, the general rule is up to 2 days. Departments could find 1 day for some positions, maybe upper level management. But again, there is the exception for departments to apply to the Chief of Staff. So if an employee is serving in a position that is eligible for remote work, and again, it would be eligible for remote work if in their department policy, it's one of the positions that are listed as eligible, they can request a remote work agreement. And when they submit the request, what will happen is the supervisor, in conjunction with the department director and in consultation with HR, is going to look at the employee's application and apply 5 criteria to determine if the employee is eligible for remote work. The criteria basically, require successful completion of probation, unless the department has created an onboarding plan that calls for remote work sooner, no sustained and active disciplinary action or active performance improvement plan, but this requirement can be waived with approval from the director and HR. So maybe for a minor discipline related to attendance or something, that wouldn't necessarily, make someone ineligible for an agreement. Acceptable conduct and satisfactory performance, the ability to perform productively when they are remote without, shifting tasks to others, burdening others. And then we also have outlined pretty specific worksite requirements in Section 8. So they're also going to have to attest that their proposed remote work location would meet those requirements. So the remote work agreement itself is referenced in the policy, and it's basically going to lay out the terms and conditions under which the employee may perform remote work. It's going to outline the remote work schedule, specifying which days are on site and which days are remote and the time, the precise remote work location. Employees are not going to be permitted to work at other locations outside of the location in their agreement unless they get permission from their supervisor. And we are going to push hard in HR to ask supervisors to be, judicious in granting those requests, because they should really be temporary or extraordinary. We don't want, for security purposes and accountability, people, working at various locations throughout the day. We have pretty specific performance and accountability standards, and IT also has technology and security requirements that will be built into the agreement. So the policy does provide discretion to directors to modify or suspend remote work schedules, either temporarily or permanently, based on operational need. We also built in language that on a week-to-week basis, a director can adjust a remote work schedule for use of leave during the week. In terms of our performance and accountability standards, we have 5 that are laid out in the policy. 1, basically being expectations, and this is going to be really important and in a collaborative process with the employee and the supervisor, because we really want the remote work agreement to lay out what the expectations are when people are at home, what kind of goals they're going to have, what kind of deliverables, and basically what we expect in terms of productivity and output. Discipline, all work rules and policies are going to apply. Ethics code, handbook, all of them when someone is working remotely. Communication and collaboration. So the employees will need to be accessible when they are working remotely on the remote days. And the remote work agreement is specifically going to lay out what the required communication channels are. And that, again, will be a collaborative discussion with the employee and the supervisor. We do require additional tracking as part of a departmental remote work policy. So the departments are going to have to come up with some sort of process to track the employees' remote work when they're home and to have them log it. We also have language regarding employee illness and dependent care. Basically that, this policy can't be a substitute for self-care or dependent care, that we expect employees to be able to put their full attention to work and work when they are remote. The policy also talks about equipment and supplies. So we are not going to provide additional equipment to employees to work remotely. They will use their county issue computer that they currently have for remote work purposes. The policy does say we're not obligated to issue additional equipment, but if for some reason employees want to purchase peripheral devices, they can at their own expense, but they have to use a list that sets out which devices are approved by IT. Then turning to the work site, the policy in Section 8 lays out standards that departments are going to have to incorporate into their policy, as well as terms and conditions about the work site that employees are going to have to adhere to as part of their remote work agreement. So we have some general requirements, basically security, both electronic security and security of any physical files, some safety requirements for the remote work site, and requirements for power and internet. The policy does build in a right to inspect the remote work location. In terms of workers' compensation, we have outlined in the policy that if someone has a work-related injury or illness that they sustain at home, they should they should follow the procedure set forth in the handbook. I believe it's in section 8.05 regarding accident reporting. We do have language that would allow the county to inspect the location if there is an accident. And then just some general liability waiver language. Turning back to the worksite requirements again about the safety and security, we require the location to be secure, safe, free of distraction and hazards. It very specifically says the employees have to have a reliable power source, an internet service with enough bandwidth that they can have a constant remote connection and enough bandwidth that'll let them do their jobs effectively. And again, absent permission from their supervisors, employees are only going to be permitted to work remotely at the designated location set forth in their agreement. Section 9 talks about technology and security requirements from IT, and we have referenced them in that section and then attached them as an appendix. Basically, there are security and confidentiality requirements, so the employees are going to have to follow current IT policy regarding safety and security, and that is the electronic equipment and communications policy. Remote access requirements, namely that employees are not going to be permitted to plug their own personal devices into our network. So they can't use, personal printers at home and plug them into our network when they're working remotely. Only county-owned equipment or equipment owned by the state for our HHS folks. Secure work area requirements, again, that's physical security, making sure files are secure from people who are visiting the remote work location or living there. And again, we have some few additional requirements too, like if IT wants to do supplemental security training and require employees to complete that, they're going to have to do it following our phishing reporting procedures and other things like that. We also built in language outlining records management requirements, basically letting employees know that they have a responsibility to maintain and manage our records in accordance with their applicable records retention policy, whether they are working remotely or on site. So they're going to be continuing to create records, even at home. They're going to have to store them in a location where others can access it if they're not in the building. And of course, retain it in accordance with the retention schedule. And we are requiring each department policy to identify the records management responsibilities for employees. And that's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Before I open it up to questions, I just again want to thank the administration for the time that you gave us last week. And a quick question for you. Roughly, how many employees do we have in Cuyahoga County that are going to fall under this policy?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that right now. I know we have, I believe all of our HHS agencies right now, which is, a huge portion of our employee population, are working either fully remote. I think the EFS specialists are fully remote right now, and the others some kind of hybrid schedule.
So beyond the scope of HHS, roughly, you can get back to us on the number, but it's...
I would expect there's not going to be a lot in the sheriff's department. That's about 1,100 employees or so, just by the nature of the work that they do. So probably, some of the professional staff in fiscal, public works, development, law, HR.
Okay. I asked that question because as chair of this committee, I'm looking at this through a broader lens.
Sure.
than just the very amazing, very necessary HHS department. But I also wanted to thank my colleague publicly, Chairwoman Yvonne Conwell, who chairs the HHS committee, for her passion and dedication to that agency and wanting to make sure things are running smoothly in that department. So I'm going to turn it over to her for a second.
Thank you. So I just want to make a statement first, that it was thank you to the administration for meeting with us and having me have a clearer understanding. And I also met with some of the directors of HHS who actually have to implement these policies for their employees. But my understanding became better that because I know during COVID time, it was very necessary, or the type of work that the HHS departments performed was that, it was very needed because they had human contact with other individuals. But in learning in this process that the remote work policy is not to penalize anyone, but to actually open it up to make it universal for all Cuyahoga County employees that haven't had the benefits as of HHS employees have. So first and foremost, I wanted to make sure that was clear in going forward. And this policy is very inclusive for all departments and not just HHS. So it was looked at a 10,000 view or whatever, what would be fair and equitable amongst all departments that may, based on the discretion of their departments and what is the work needed, that it would be fair to open it up, not with a health scare at our backs, but just moving forward. And that's the one thing that I always say, that I hate to say anything came positive from COVID, but a lot of things did. We have expanded our technology and allowing individuals to work from home. So that's very important that we have that now. And so I think it's a beneficial policy to have. So on one side, we have employees that don't want to lose it or limit to what they're used to, but then we're also opening up a broader scale to other departments that never had it. So we're trying to be respectful of all points of view. My two questions would be on the performance and accountability standards page. They're not numbered, so that's the heading. Have the employees currently that are on the right to work policy or the remote work policy have these criteria already? You talked about, I just want to know if it's something that's added. I know each department is different, but I would assume that the individuals or the employees that are already currently on this policy have some kind of performance and accountability standards, or is this new?
Yes, I believe that the employees currently working remotely do have performance and accountability standards in the HHS agency-specific policies. I know Director Merriman is here. That's correct, right? Yeah.
Okay, and then my second question would be on the technology and security requirements that you most recently spoke about.
Yeah.
For the security and confidentiality requirements, how do we plan on verifying, or your department plans on verifying this, that they're not plugging into to the county's equipment, or that they have their own broadband? How are we going to do those various checks?
Sure. So the way we plan to proceed is that, again, employees may request a remote work agreement, and if they are eligible for a remote work agreement, there's going to be an interactive process with their supervisor and director. And one of the criteria that they're going to have to attest to in their agreement is that their proposed work location does meet the technology and security requirements laid out in Section 9 of the appendix and referenced in Section 8. And I know our Chief Information Officer, Andy Johnson's security team. He's got a very robust team, and they're always watching and analyzing to make sure that things aren't going awry with our network.
Okay, so there will not be any in-home inspections or anything like that?
The policy does permit it if, we needed to. That is built in there.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I know there are a lot of questions, and I want you to talk a little bit about why the policy was needed. We know
Sure.
that we've heard from Child Support Services, those that have expressed their concern about the 2-day limit outlined in the policy. If you could talk about the reasoning for the 2 days. And you may not have this information today, but if you could let us know how many departments currently have employees working remotely, and how long will they have to develop the department-specific policies? And if Director Merriman or Chief Janice has anything to offer at this time, I'd invite you up. It might help us narrow some of the other questions that we may have moving forward.
So with respect to your
Like
first,
when will this policy be implemented?
for the first question was why we felt the policy was needed. So we are trying to introduce a benefit and flexibility throughout the county workforce for those employees who can work from home. And so in order to ensure consistency and equity into, that undertaking, that's why we decided to do sort of a master framework policy for departments to follow as they implement. But we are trying to standardize to the extent we can, and also, keep people in the office some of the time to minimize any, weakening of relationships or intra-office communication and team building. So we see it as a balance.
Thank you.
Chair Turner, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me up. Eric Janis, Chief of Staff. Just to reiterate what Sarah said, this policy is intended to be a framework and to allow for some flexibility for decisions on an agency-by-agency basis, while providing both clarity as it relates to things such as technology, liability, other expectations that don't currently exist in the handbook, but also, and importantly, provide some sense of equity across the organization. We do have 4,500 or so employees under the executive's purview, and I don't know that anybody else has current telework policies other than the HHS agencies we've mentioned. So this policy would open up and set an expectation that we're having an agency by agency discussion that might allow that for other employees. So that's the reason for the policy and the framework. As it relates to why 2 days a week, we are trying to strike the balance, as Sarah said, between providing flexibility to employees while also maintaining some semblance of culture throughout the organization, some semblance of teamwork, and expectation that employees are working together on things, and that managers have the opportunity to have those conversations with employees together in person. So that's the reasoning behind this, and we're excited. I would just add one other thing based on earlier conversations. First of all, Chair Turner, Councilmember Conwell, thank you both for the good conversation we had last week. I really appreciate it. It is not, as Sarah outlined, any exception to the policy has to come to me for approval. And as I indicated to both of you, and I'm willing to say here, I intend to provide maximum flexibility here as we adjust to this policy, number one. So there is going to be no immediate expectation, should this pass, any employee's work situation is going to immediately change. Secondly, as it relates to the HHS agencies that may have people working from home more than this policy outlines, I'm going to provide real flexibility for those agencies for two reasons. One, to allow for a period of time for employees to adjust. And secondly, uniquely with our HHS agencies, as we're talking about reorganizing them where they're going to work as we're moving out of one building into another, we know that there's going to be a lot of a change, and we're going to have to make adjustments and evaluations as it relates to space. And so therefore, I'm very, very likely to allow for exceptions for the foreseeable future, probably on a year-by-year basis until a lot of those issues have sorted themselves out. I want to adhere to the policy, so I don't want to definitively say I'm standing up here today and saying I'm going to do this. I want to have our directors and our agency directors put those policies in place. But as I indicated to you both, I plan to be very flexible and reasonable in allowing for that adjustment and thinking about not changing dramatically while we are changing buildings and moving people physically around.
Any questions for the chief or director? Councilman Sweeney,
Thank you.
Miller.
Chief and Director, how are you? Just with the ample time, do you have because you said ample time to let them adjust their schedule. Is that a month, a week? I'm just trying to.
I mean, I would certainly say at least a month.
At least a month, yeah. I'm
That's
just trying to get it.
trying to be reasonable. And if a director told me that they were hearing from employees they need more time to adjust to any policy change, we'll give that time. The intent here is not to force people to do things, but be reasonable.
To the chair, you are the poster child of flexibility and reasonable, just for the record.
Thank you.
So I thank you for that. And you said some sort of tracking. That kind of gave me a pause through the chair. It was a little bit stronger than that. I think I need
Track.
for when you're on remote. You said some sort of tracking. Just those words came out, and tracking's very important, I believe, in the remote setting.
The department is going to have to utilize some form of having employees log their remote work.
That's to be determined, but it's going to be very systematic.
Yes.
Okay. And then, does anybody know pre-COVID how much the county had in regards to remote work options, if any? Yeah, that's. Thank you for the overwhelming answer to my question. And through the chair, if an employee asks to be considered for remote work and there's some a denial, but there's, in their eyes, they think they deserve it, is there an appeal process? And if it is, what would that be? Does that go from the supervisor to the director, then the chief, and then the county executive, then the council, or is it just a one-step thing, or?
There's no appeal process in the language of the policy. It specifically says there is not an appeal process.
Oh, through the chair, why not?
Because, again, this is a management option we are extending, and we have built in criteria for the departments to consider when determining if someone is eligible for remote work.
Yeah.
And they are required to consult with human resources when they make that determination. So, we believe that having the mechanism in place will ensure fairness and equity.
And through the chair, fairness and equity is always important, but if you have no absolute appeal process and you got these 5 points, and this thing is really evident, look at this, Councilman. This says what it says, and we can't appeal it. Some kind of appeal would be.
Always bring their concerns up the chain. It just, the policy doesn't outline a specific appeal process in it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And
through
if
the
I may
chair.
add, as a practical matter, council member, the individual agency plans need to be approved by HR in consultation with me, and I certainly have to explicitly approve any exceptions. But that goes for the directors as well. So if a director presents a plan that does not allow employees or a class of employees who otherwise, per the policy criteria, be eligible, I'm going to be asking why. And if there's not a reasonable business case, then I'm going to say you need to go back and work on your policy. So again, we're trying to be reasonable here. As it relates to individual employees This is also going to be determined based on employee performance, whether they have any discipline issues, where the manager may or may not may decide or to allow or not allow for an individual employee to telework. So that will be a manager's decision. But as far as agency-wide, there's expected to be the purpose of the policy is equity. And so a big purpose of the policy. So, you know, if a director comes to me and has employees that meet the criteria but says, I don't want to allow anybody to work from home at all, then I'm going to be asking the question, you got to make the business case. Otherwise, we need to revisit this and we need to look at it differently. And I've actually had that conversation with a few directors already.
And thank you. Just I'm going to keep driving this one home through the chair. It's that one individual employee. They have 5 conditions. You said the manager might make the decision, could be a director, it could be a different department that has the same, one person might get knocked out because they have one thing in their file, and another department might have 2 things in their file, or there might be a person, I just am stuck on some kind of appeal process. Manager says yes, and it goes to the director. Or I'd like it to go to our HR, because they're the mothership of all, without giving you too much work, or you have too much work to begin with, but just that one employee, I can just see it going, that's not fair, and I think I deserve it because of all these real reasons. Through the chair.
So, again, the policy, the legislation has 5 criteria that have
yeah, I
to
read
be
'em.
applied. And the policy does say that, yes, the supervisor is working on the determination, but they have to do it in consultation with their director and with human resources. So we're going to be looking at denials and questioning and saying, okay, why did you deny this? So that's kind of where there is some oversight built in there to ensure that
I'm just going with, it's nothing until a decision is made, deny. Something happened, approved or denied, and then the next step, it says, does it say preclude the appeal in the legislation? No appeals, absolutely not.
let me make sure I get this right.
And we talked through the chair to the chief. This is important in regards to camaraderie and everybody working together and just the team that our executive is putting together
Yeah.
as one unit. And I just want to try to, this could have a little wedge into it. He got it, I didn't get it kind of thing. Through the chair.
So the department's determination, the policy provides that the department's determination whether or not an employee is eligible for remote work is not subject to challenge or appeal by the employee. So
Yeah,
that's
through the chair, I think it's too rough, too hard, everything else is nice enough, but that one's pretty rough. So that's my 2 cents, and we'll see where it takes us, and I might throw an amendment out there and figure it out how to do it. And just the last thing, you mentioned about my chairwoman from HHS, Yvonne, mentioned a current policy in place for proceedings. The gentleman that says, no, it's wrong, so I can have him come up and tell him why, and you said, yes, there's current policies and procedures in place for whatever Yvonne asked for the current work, the current direction. And then when somebody that can't talk just has a different of opinion, I won't mind hearing from him if that's okay with you, or after the presentation, we can have him come up because we're talking about it now.
Can you clarify your question?
Mr. Reed says what was stated at the podium was inaccurate, and he wants to be able to say why. That there is not current policies and procedures in place for the current remote work process. Is that it? Okay, my bad. I'll just leave you to the side. I'm going to withdraw that for right now. That's what I thought I heard. And I'm going to thank you for allowing me to have my mini diatribe. And I look forward to trying to give a little bit of flexibility to a denial of the appeal process in regards to this program. Thank you.
Councilman Sweeney, we can, through the chair, that was my first thing, is to see what all policies, who had a policy. That was my initial, before I met with the administration. So pretty much all the HHS departments have, not all their positions work remotely, but most of them have. Some departments that do. So when Levine gets back, or if Joe has it, we can send them all to you. Yeah, we have them.
And I'll say that was a challenge for me. I wish that we had had those things in place before we were reviewing a countywide policy, but here we are, and we're working through it. Councilman Miller?
Madam Chair, thank you. And am I correct, Madam Chair, to the director, that this policy is only going to apply to employees that are under the supervision of the executive as opposed to other agencies out there?
Yes, so the policy, if approved, will be referenced in the employee handbook, which applies to employees who work for county executive agencies and departments, as well as county council staff.
And Madam Chair, Director, you said in your presentation that this policy is separate from telecommuting policy 6.09. Can you tell me describe that policy briefly?
Sure. So section 6.09 of the handbook speaks to telecommuting, and that section basically says that the county can permit temporary telecommuting arrangements for employees who need to work out of the office for specific reasons. Dependent care is one, inclement weather, illness, disability, caring for an ill family member. When doing so wouldn't impact county operations. But it's really was designed, I believe, to be a stopgap because it's limited to 90 days.
Okay, thank you. And Madam Chair, Director, how many county employees currently work remotely?
I believe we looked at that. It should only be HHS employees. Was it 1,600? Yeah. I would say between 1,000 and 2,000, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Probably closer to 1,500, I think, was what the number was.
Okay. And Madam Chair, Director, do we have remote work agreements with any of these people, or is the concept of a remote work agreement something new that's going to come out of this legislation?
So I believe some of the HHS agencies have remote work agreements. At least I saw when, just kind of penciling through the policies that there were remote work, something the employee needed to sign, or at least some.
And if I may add, Councilmember, I think part of the purpose here is to standardize that practice. So everybody is working from the same set of documents as it relates to an agreement between an employee and a manager. And then I would also add what we don't have, which this policy adds, is that expectation that an agency director provide an overall plan for the entire agency. So we see how the parts fit into the whole.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, to the Director, suppose that we pass this legislation at the last council meeting in October and it becomes immediately effective. At that point, will anybody who's currently working remotely have to stop working remotely until this gets put in place, or is there going to be a transition time to allow agreements to be put together and departmental policies to be established, and how long do we anticipate that taking?
through the chair to the council member, thank you for the question. This is actually a byproduct of the conversation we had last week with the chair and with council staff, the acknowledgement that once this policy goes into place, what are you going to do? Because technically folks might be out of compliance with the new policy. So for those agencies, those HHS agencies that currently have employees working from home, I am literally going to ask their directors or through Director Merriman to send me an email the day this passes saying, we would like to continue our current approach until we can take the month or 2 months to put our overall agency plan together, and I intend to approve that. So there is going to be no change for employees the day this passes. Again, the intent here is not to try to be difficult, it's try to be flexible and reasonable. So we have no intention of asking people to come back on day one should this policy pass.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
And if we could pull another layer off of that onion, once all of the policies have been submitted and approved, and you receive this email, and it's business as usual, they continue to do their jobs, what is the expectation in terms of a timeline that they will be required to start to come in for that third day?
Chair Turner, I appreciate the question. Let me clarify, sort of there are two things going on here. One would be the immediate time this council, should they choose, pass this ordinance or this resolution with this policy. For that interim period, they're going to send me an email saying we want to continue as is until, in accordance with the plan, I put a policy for my agency together, and I'm going to approve that. Once an agency puts its plan together, whether that takes 30 days or 60 days or however long it takes, if there is an exception requested and I approve it, we'll determine how long that will be, but I think we talked about a 1-year exception and then to reevaluate any exception on a yearly basis. So there's no change for the couple of months until an agency director proposes their policy for their entire agency. And if their proposal includes an exception and I approve it, that exception will last for what I was contemplating was a 12-month period, and we will reevaluate it again in 12 months. So there will be some level of certainty for employees throughout this process.
Okay. Director Merriman? Good morning.
Good morning.
Just want to check in with you about your understanding of the policy.
Thank you. David Merriman here, Director of the Department of Health and Human Services. First, before I share my understanding on the policy, I want to acknowledge this administration has been very patient and willing to allow us to continue with our status quo plans for the past year and now 10 months. And so HHS has had the benefit of a hybrid plan. And I think the conversations that have been throughout this entire time is there will be a county-wide plan for for all county employees to reap this benefit, and you can continue doing what you're doing until that plan is created. I think that spirit is shown today in what the Chief of Staff has said. He's worked with us throughout the entire legislative process, hearing what Director Gowan, Director Dobbins, Director Fletcher, what all of our directors need in the interim, and then what their thoughts are moving forward. I strongly support the proposal that we look at this on an annual basis. Things are changing. Our workplace is changing. The way that we work is changing. The needs of our community is changing. And at the end of the day, what I've heard loud and clear, especially from Director Gowan and Dobbins, Brazelton, is that they need as directors the flexibility to meet the needs of residents. First and foremost, this is about what is needed by our residents, what's needed by our communities. And that may change on a month-to-month basis. We just had a tornado. And if there was a period where our staff are offline because their home is unable to have internet or power, then we need to have the flexibility to bring people back in. If something like that happened in our county and our headquarters was impacted, we would be sending people to their homes. That flexibility is critical. And I think what you're seeing is very clearly a commitment to responding first and foremost to public need, to client need, to community need, and secondarily, having a workplace that affords all employees this benefit of having some work-life balance and some additional flexibility. I think that what Eric Janis, the Chief of Staff, has just said, he said to me repeatedly, I want to know from your directors what they will need in that transition period. I want it to be clear. I want us to have direct communication. He intends to review, and I think he will approve those, but he wants to hear them from the directors, which I support. And then ultimately what their plan will be for the next year, as so many of them are preparing to move buildings. So I think this is the right approach. It's methodical, it's logical, and ultimately it's going to be tied to communication, support, and conversation. And the last 2 points I want to make. Number one, there was a question, how many departments currently have plans? I can answer that. 8 departments have plans, and the 5 shared service administrations also have plans. They vary widely. Some allow staff to work from home 1 day a week because operationally that's all they can handle. If they do more than 1 day a week, we're not going to respond to bills. We're not going to get checks out. And so that's what we do. Other departments have full remote work, but even that is becoming difficult to sustain given the high traffic of residents to the Virgil Brown building. We have to be responsive. So we are doing, I think, a good job of managing with these plans. What you're hearing today is very clearly a commitment to have this be a county-wide and equitable approach, and HHS will fit within it.
Okay, any questions? Councilwoman?
I have one through the chair to Mr. Merriman. Will the directors of the departments collaborate with their supervisors on the specific remote work policy as it's being drafted, or will it be a unilateral decision?
They absolutely will include input from their managers and their supervisors. I think that's how they direct right now. I think if I know Kevin, I know Tiffany, I know Jackie, I know Shauna, I know Natasha, they're all getting input from their middle managers, from their direct service staff, and they're asking, what's the need? What do our clients need? What do our employees need? I know they're constantly gathering that input and they're making adjustments and changes, and I expect that to continue, or I'm sure we'll hear otherwise.
Questions?
We're going to wrap up.
Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just on, if you want to contemplate some kind of amendment for consideration for the appeal process, I'd rather have you do it than me come up with something and see if I can convince my colleagues.
Through the chair to the council member, we will sit down and talk about that and see what we can think through.
I do appreciate your open-mindedness.
Are we ready for the question? So again, I want to thank you for the transparency in our conversations. I want our employees to know that you are top of mind as the executive branch and the legislative branch attempt to work together to provide services to our residents, which is top of mind, but to also recognize the value that you all deliver every day for us. And I don't want that to be understated. Not everyone's going to be happy, but we have tried through deliberation to come up with the best solution for the county. And I know that I can depend on you, Chief, to continue to work with us through this process, and Director Merriman, that as adjustments need to be made, that they will be seriously considered for the mental health of our own employees, right? We don't want them to be stressed out or anxious, worried day to day what work is going to look like for them. So I'm confident that we will come to some solutions that will be best for everyone. So with that being said, can I have a motion to move this item to the full body of council for second reading as substituted?
So move.
Can I have a second? Been moved and seconded.
Madam Chair,
Councilman Miller?
before we vote on the legislation, I would just like to indicate my support for two basic reasons. One is that this is a very important area of human resources activity, especially since COVID, and it makes sense for us to have a policy. And secondly, that without a policy, there could easily be favoritism, variation, and various issues between departments and between employees, and this policy should help us take a standard, well-known, reported, and recognized approach that everybody can agree to. So for these reasons, I support the legislation. I'd like to have my name added. Thank you.
Please add Councilman Miller's name. Any other comments, discussion? Please
We
add.
clarify who seconded the motion, please? Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Please add my name.
Yes, noted.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Is there any miscellaneous business? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.